my friends. It's your old pal Jordan the Lion coming to you live from Seattle. Well, today we're going to do a special vlog in honor of Kurt Cobain. In April of 1994, Kurt Cobain's body was found in the greenhouse of his Lake Washington mansion, and he had a pretty peculiar few days leading up to it. Today I'm going to take you to the locations and tell you about his last days here in Washington. Daze with Jordan the Lion begins now. Well, we're heading off to our first stop of the day. Pretty much where our story begins. So on the morning of March 30th, Kurt Cobain and his friend Dylan Carlson got in a car and decided to go out and buy a shotgun for Kurt's home defense. And prior to this, Kurt had an overdose in Rome and been hospitalized. And when he came back, his friends, Courtney, the band members all had an intervention and told him that they thought he needed to go to rehab. So we're now over at where Stan Baker Sports was, where he purchased that gun. So right here was the former location of Stan Baker Sports. Kurt and Dylan came here, and Kurt paid a little over $300 for a Remington shotgun and also got some ammunition. Now, he couldn't buy it under his name. He actually had to have Dylan do it under his name because Kurt had had all of his weapons seized by the police. So the official receipt on this was under Dylan Carlson's name, but they bought the gun, took it back to Kurt's house up by the lake, and then later that day Kurt went to Seattle-Tacoma Airport and decided to fly out to enter rehab. Now, I'll tell you something interesting that happened because I'm actually going to fly out today. When we get to the airport, I'll tell you something that happened at the airport. Well, by the power of editing, we've traveled through time. We are now at SeaTac, Seattle-Tacoma Airport. This is where Kurt came in the early afternoon after purchasing the shotgun. His normal driver brought him here to catch a flight to Los Angeles to enter rehab. Now when he got here, the driver said, as soon as he got out, he said, "Oh F, I have the ammunition, the shotgun shells in my carry-on," and he asked the driver to take the ammunition back to his house. Now this is also the same airport that Kurt would fly back into a day later after he would leave rehab. Now when Kurt got to rehab, the people that were helping him in Marina Del Rey at the rehab facility said that they knew that he wasn't going to stick around. When you talked to him, they said he didn't really think he was a junkie. He didn't see any real problem with what he was doing. And they said within a day, he stayed for one day, and then the next morning climbed a wall and took off, which they said was odd because there was no one that kept you there. You could leave at any time, and they said there was a door that he could have walked through that was not more than 50 feet away. So he took off, used his credit card to buy a return flight from Los Angeles back to Seattle-Tacoma Airport, and ended up sitting next to Guns N' Roses' Duff McKagan on the flight back. When they got back, he got in his car, Kurt had a driver there, and the driver brought him back to Seattle. Now within a few hours of being back, he was in a taxi and he was going to our next location. So Kurt eventually made his way here. It's no longer here, but what used to be here was called the Crest Mobile Trailer Park. And that's where Kurt used to buy his heroin. One of the people that he used to buy it from anyway, over here on Aurora. They said this was a very common stop for him. He would pick up what he needed, and instead of going home, he would go to where our next location is, and he would spend many days and nights at our next location. And it's gonna be kind of interesting to see it, because just to look at this place and think, though Kurt didn't die here, as much time as he spent here, he very well could have. So let's go to our next stop. Now Kurt never saw himself as a junkie. He actually saw that he was one of the few people that did heroin that had a good reason, because of his years worth of stomach problems and stomach ailments, that was his excuse. Now, he had a favorite motel that he liked to retreat and do his heroin in. This is that motel, the Marco Polo. The reason he would do it is because at the time he would get his heroin right up this street, right up Aurora, at a trailer park that we just went to. So once Kurt would get his heroin, he would come here and he would always stay in the same room and retreat, because even though he had a nice mansion to go back to where he could have done his heroin, he didn't feel in control there. So he would come here to room 226, which I'll show you. On more than one occasion, this was actually his go-to room. It's actually up the stairs and in the corner. Kind of crazy to think of how many hours and days he would have came here and wasted away. And if you look at the stairs here, these are definitely the original stairs. There's no question about it. This is the same railing and everything. They have renovated this place, I read online, but just the rooms, not the building itself. So here was his room back here, 226. Just crazy to think inside of that room how many hours he would have sat in there. They said he would eat potato chips and just go away for days, just fade off. I wondered if this room for any reason had, I don't know, maybe like some ghostly attraction. So for my entire stay here in Seattle, I've been staying here. So let's go inside and take a look. I'm going to tell you a little bit of my observations from staying here. For one thing, I can kind of understand why he liked it. There's the security of being in a corner. The windows gave him access to looking out to a lot of things without really being noticed. He could look down this alleyway. He could look out these windows. A little bit of safety for him. Now, one of the things that I wondered was if I played nothing but Nirvana while I was in here, and I spent time in every place that I thought maybe possibly, not knowing how this room would be laid out, how or where he would have sat or spent that time. And I never really ever fall into, you know, believing in ghosts or anything like that. But I do believe that you can feel a change in something. So I spent time laying on the bed, laying on the floor, sitting on the floor, sitting in these seats, sitting in those two seats, even going as far as sitting in the bathroom and standing in the shower. Now I'll tell you, I did actually feel something strange. Every time I sat right here, every time I sat there, something felt weird. As I sat here, it dawned on me I could totally understand why he chose this room. He could hear the world outside, he could see the world outside, but he could completely avoid it at the same time. It's just so weird to be in here, have that feeling. I don't know if maybe it's because we know that he stayed here and it makes you feel like there's something here, but I'm telling you, every time I sat here, staring at the door, obviously, I just felt something. And to me, it just kind of an interesting experience getting to stay in a room that he spent so many hours, so many days in. I will say this though, I probably had a better sleep here than I have almost anywhere else I've ever traveled. I would highly recommend this room, and it was pretty clean. It wasn't very expensive, and yeah, it was pretty easy to get this room. I spent a better part of a week here. So now we're gonna head out of here. We're gonna go to our next stop. Now we're heading off to the Capitol Hill area where Kurt was spotted a few days before his death. We're looking for Broadway and Denny Way. So right here on the corner of Broadway and Denny was one of Kurt's favorite places to eat. This was actually the Carl's Jr., and he liked it because he said they had the best burgers in Seattle. He was spotted here on April 3rd, standing outside the Carl's Jr., just kind of looking sad and bedraggled, and the person that saw him said that it wasn't much of a surprise to see him here because he had a heroin dealer that lived right around the corner from here. So this was one of the last places he was seen. And then he was also spotted by a photographer not far from here. So this area has kind of an interesting story to Kurt. You see, this is Pine Street. When he first recorded Bleach, his first order of business was he tried to start his own custodial business. He had been a custodian at his old school before this. Tried to start a custodial business, and it was called the Pine Street Custodial Services. Didn't do so well, and luckily for him, he became the guy who pulled us into the 90s with his amazing sound. Now this is Linda's Tavern. This is where the photographer said he saw Kurt on April 3rd standing outside of here, and he said he looked, you know, kind of sad, and said he looked like he was waiting to score some heroin. This would have been on April 3rd. Now I'm going to take you to where he was spotted after this. So I popped in this little eatery to get something to drink and look at some of the Wall of Fame over there.
Oh my god.
Now your hands smell like Roquefort. What would you prefer? Like Roquefort or garlic?
No, I have heard that lemons, especially like when you need.
There's Nemo's. So now we've arrived in the neighborhood of where Kurt's house was and one of the last locations he was seen. So here we are at Cactus in Madison Park, and this is one of the last meals that Kurt was witnessed having with some friends. What's crazy is that the people that worked here at the time said that he appeared kind of out of it while he was here, and when he went to pay, his credit card was declined because Courtney Love had filed him as a missing person, but actually did it under Kurt's mom's name, filed it under her name. So she had shut off his credit cards, and so he ended up having to write a check, and they said that when he wrote the check, it was like, he was so out of it that it was like he put the dollar amount on the name line and everything. They said that while he was here, he had a banana pudding and asked for a listing of what was showing at the movie theater, and then him and his friends went to see the piano. It's a pretty nice place. And I found an interview online with somebody that was here when he was filling out the check, and so I'll show you what table he was writing that check at. So it was right here at this table that he was filling out that check, and he was actually sitting outside when he ate. And I decided to go ahead and have my lunch here, and they said they make their own guacamole, so I had to try that out. I got the quesadillas, and they were really good. I'm not even going to be able to finish them. All right, great meal. So this would have been the last place that Kurt would have been seen eating on the evening of April 3rd, which they believe that they went and had their date to the movies. And they said even though it was April and it was kind of a chilly night, he still opted to sit outside and start his meal with dessert. Well, now we're back at Linda's Tavern, which is the last place that Kurt Cobain was seen alive. A waitress said that it was her birthday, and Kurt came in about 11 p.m. or 12 a.m. and she jokingly said to him, "Hey, are you here for my birthday?" And he's like, "No." She said he didn't even order a drink. He just walked in, walked straight to the back like he was meeting someone, and she said she never saw him leave. This is not the greatest neighborhood, but this is weird to think that this would have been the last place that Kurt would have been seen alive. Kind of weird. You'd think there'd be some sort of little memorial or just something for in his honor, but nope. Just a sign that he probably would have loved that said "Hippies use side door." All right, well, our next stop is also our last stop. Let's go to where Kurt's house was and where they discovered Kurt's body. Well, from here we walk. There's no parking down there. But now we're heading to the house that Kurt bought at the beginning of 1994, where he was found. Now, of course, as many of you may know, many people believe that Kurt didn't take his own life. A lot of the facts don't add up, and there was actually a private investigator hired by Courtney Love to tail Kurt Cobain. He recorded a lot of her conversations, and even he doesn't believe that Kurt killed himself. Now, this investigator came up here while Kurt was already dead with Dylan Carlson, and they searched the house quickly, albeit, but never found Kurt. To which always made the investigator Tom Grant skeptical, because he said he thought that's a place that Dylan should have pointed out to him. So one of the reasons that people don't believe that he actually killed himself is because the amount of heroin in his system was lethal. 3 times, and they said he would have never even had the strength to pick up a gun and fire it. Here it is, here's the house. One of the last sightings of Kurt was actually right here. A woman came by the day before they believe Kurt died, on the 4th, and said that they talked to him right out front of the gate. But how he was discovered was in a greenhouse that's no longer here on the property. Courtney had sent a technician to come and install security lights, and when he was walking by the greenhouse, he noticed Kurt's body laying in there, and sadly he was gone. They said he had been dead since probably the 5th of April. So now fans have a place to come and memorialize him somewhat, because they have put a couple of benches over here right beside the property. These are the Kurt Memorial benches, literally right next to the property, which is right over here. I guess we'll never really know. Here's a Kurt quote. Some also even speculate, you can see some of the house over here, some also speculate that some of the handwriting on the note doesn't match the handwriting in the rest of the letter. What a sad ending. One of the other odd things about this case is that the police said they did do a thorough investigation, and it came to light that there were rolls of film that had never been developed that were recently developed. Just, I don't know. Something just doesn't sit right. Something just doesn't sit right. Here's a second bench over here. A bunch of people have drawn that Nirvana smiley face. I want to take this stairwell up and see if there's better view from up here looking down on the house. One of the theories about Kurt's death insists that he was shooting up with other people at the time of his death. People he knew, and that they injected him with more than he was comfortable with. Now, there was a musician for the Mentors named El Duque, and he said on camera that he was offered by someone, I'm not going to say who, but you can watch many documentaries and they will mention it, $50,000 to kill Kurt. He said in an interview he couldn't do it when she asked because he was on tour. So he offered a friend's name, and in the interview actually said the friend's name. A couple of days later, that man, El Duque, was mysteriously killed by being pushed in front of a train, or finding his way in front of a train. This is kind of the view Kurt would have had from his house. A house that they said he rarely felt comfortable in, paid $1.3 million, and they said he spent a majority of his time while he was at the house in a cupboard in his bedroom playing his guitar. Which is not hard to believe, because if you saw the vlog I did of the place that he supposedly wrote In Utero in Hollywood, he was living with one of the band members of Hole at the time. They made a documentary about her, and she says when she and Kurt lived there with Courtney, that Kurt used to sit in the cabinet there or in one of the closets and write songs. There's a little bit better view into the property from up here. And this is kind of the view that we would have had from that famous photo when they found him kind of looking through the door and seeing his... So the greenhouse that Kurt was found dead in, above the garage, was torn down many years ago. It no longer is there. And one thing we do know is that the very last thing he did before going into that greenhouse was grabbing a Barks root beer and taking it in there with him. It was found laying next to him. When Kurt lived here, there was no gate. That's been added since, but yeah. I kind of want to just show the house real quick from under the gate. Now, I don't know if it was this house or not, but this is his next door neighbor, and I read online that at the time of his death, his neighbor was the one of the owners of Starbucks. All right, we're gonna head out of here. I'm gonna go grab my things and take off to the airport and fly home. Well, the snow has begun. Unfortunately, the cemetery was closed the whole time I was here, so we didn't get to see Bruce and Brandon Lee's grave. And we're back to the room. I guess I'm leaving just in time. The snow is really coming down. If you look across the way, there's a dog. I've seen him every night that I've been here, looking out that window, probably waiting for his owner to get home, like Ja. Well, my friends, we're headed back to Los Angeles. It's going to be dark by the time I get in the air, and it's going to be dark when I arrive, so we'll call it a night. Hope you guys enjoyed Seattle. Thank you, Mark A. Collins and Sean Glosson, for making contributions to my channel. Thank you all for watching. See you all tomorrow. Good night.